Hi, Zalna Jansen here, and welcome back to my vlog on lobbying and advocacy and the best way to raise your issues in the legislative and policy making process. So in last week's vlog video, I looked at what lobbying is and then concluded that lobbying is just another form of consultation in the public participation process. So this week I thought, just to follow through on that, is to look at how best we can hold government accountable, and to look at what accountability is. And accountability appears 182 times in the Constitution. So what does that mean? Accountability is to hold the organization responsible for what it does and what it does not do. So at the end of the apartheid government, we established a constitutional assembly that consisted of various political parties. And their aim was to look at what the best form of democracy would be for South Africa. So what they came up with is, we have a constitution now, and accountability appears in there 182 times. And the constitution that we have, it gives us the principle of the separation of powers. So we have separation of powers, the Constitution, and it's a system of checks and balances with the aim of not having a concentrated power. So the powers are divided between, if I can have a look, the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. And other than separating the power, it creates a system of checks and balances. So the legislative function is to make laws and hold the executive accountable. The executive is, the president is the head of the executive, and he appoints cabinet ministers to head up the various departments. And then we have the judiciary, and their role is to apply the laws, to interpret the laws made by Parliament and apply it. So I thought to look at what was in the news this week and sort of give an illustration of how the separation of powers work. On Friday's newspaper in the Cape Argus, there is a heading about SASSA, and it seems that SASSA now wants the Constitutional Court to intervene once again with cash payment services. Apparently they are intimidating the staff at the post office, and they're also intimidating grant beneficiaries. So just to give a bit of history, I think we all know are aware about what happened in SASSA. If one were to look at this, the checks and balances is Black SAS, which is an NGO, applied to the judiciary, the Constitutional Court, for an order declaring that the tender awarded to cash payment master services was unconstitutional. So they could do this because Social Security is a right within the Constitution that the executive must implement. In terms of the Constitution, another constitutional case, Grootboom, the Constitutional Court said that the executive can only implement that right in terms of its available resources, so it has to put measures in place. So the Constitution could therefore check and see if SASSA, which is a government entity under the Department of Social Services, was doing it right. And I mean, there was the Constitutional Court intervened on several occasions. I think in 2013 they declared the tender process is unconstitutional. They gave SASSA then an opportunity either to implement the payments themselves or to redo the tender process. And there was back and forth. In fact, the court then had the minister and CPS report, the former Minister of Department of Social Services and CPS report to the Constitutional Courts every 3 months to look at the payment processes. And I mean, this has been where grant beneficiaries were not paid, and the court was unhappy, and it could intervene because Social Security is one of the... In parallel to that, so the Constitutional Court was a check on the executive branch, but parallel to that there was a process from Parliament where the Department of Social Services had to report to Parliament in terms of how it spent its money and programs. So I think we're also aware that the Minister appeared before the Portfolio Committee on Social Services on several occasions. She was very evasive, but the good thing about that opportunity is that it was transparent. The hearings was on the parliamentary DSTV channel, and it was also aired on various news channels, so there was quite a lot of transparency. And even though the former minister was evasive, I think one of the things within the parliamentary precincts and at that committee is that a stakeholder could have access to an MP during a coffee break. So if I was an NGO that wanted to ask the minister a question, but I was not able to get any response from the department, I could, during a coffee break, approach an MP and raise an issue with them and build a relationship and get them to ask the question. So these are one of the ways that we can prevent corruption on such a grand scale. So last week I wrote an opinion editorial on the political funding bill. It was published in the Sunday Independent, and just in continuation in our illustration, in 2012, IDASA, the Institute for Democracy, applied to the Constitutional Court, not the Constitutional Court, the Western Cape High Court, for an order declaring that political parties declare who their donors were. The court then said it was not in the best position to force political parties to do this. In fact, it would be better placed if Parliament were to take all the interest in account and develop a bill, which they have now, and which is with the presidency. The op-ed is available on my blog section, and you can get all the details at the bottom.